Okay, I probably shouldn't be making this video. There's probably a rule. You should not make videos when you're angry or a little bit peeved. The problem is it's about the fourth time I've tried to make this video, and I'm maybe the fifth time. Now, here's what this video is going to be. Now I'll calm down, okay? I promise to calm down. This video is going to be about debt sizing. I'll delete some of this stuff. In fact, no. See, I'm already going nuts again. Okay? It's about debt sizing. And when you have debt sizing, and when we use sculpting to do our debt sizing, we're going to size the debt, then we're going to borrow the money to get the debt, then we're going to repay the debt, and then we're going to, as part of the repayment, we are going to have taxes. And taxes are going to affect the CFADS, and when taxes affect the CFADS, we have a circular reference problem that I've addressed many times. But here's what I haven't done. What I haven't done is address the second problem, and that's when the debt size changes because of the taxes, the interest during construction in the sources and uses of funds also changes. So, oh, great. I'm going to do the following. I'm going to start with an email, and I'm going to show you the email. Here's what I got in an email. I'll be very nice about this. I'm new to the project finance world, and I'm currently having difficulty adding debt sculpting to my models. It creates circularities on taxes. Very, very true because of the interest impact on the tax shield. But then to sculpt the debt, you need to calculate the cash flow available for debt service. So the second thing is to show you what's really happening and to really understand the circular reference. Now, let's say we have some interest. Let's start with that. The interest affects the taxes. The taxes are part of the CFADS calculation. But the CFADS divided by DSCR equals the debt service. But the PV of the debt service gives you the debt, and the debt gives you the interest, and then we're back here. The classic circular reference. What's really happening is you have a financial model, and you cannot kind of put the debt, you need the financial model to compute the CFADS, and that affects the taxes. That wasn't a very good philosophical statement about circular reference. Now, if you have interest during construction, somebody said it's called I don't care, which is a better word for it, but it affects the project cost. Now, the project cost minus the debt, which we have here, affects the equity. But the equity timing, if we have to put equity in faster, it affects the IDC. And then the IDC affects how much equity we have, and we go around and around and around. Really, I didn't explain that very well, but that's what's happening. And then it gets even worse, because the IDC affects the depreciation, but the depreciation affects the taxes up here, and the taxes affect the debt, and the debt affects the IDC, and you're around and around and around. And what I have done in the past, is I had a sculpting course, but I cheated big time. Big, in a big way, because I did not include a construction period. I did not include this IDC part of the problem, and that is a really painful part of the problem. So let's go down to kind of our structure. I'm going to demonstrate what I just introduced to you, kind of the structure of the model. And then after I show you the structure of the model, we'll discuss how the model works with no circular reference. We'll put in taxes, and then we'll solve the whole thing with some easy copy and paste macros, 2 of them. But then we'll see that if we want to do some interesting analysis, which is like compute a target price of our power or something like that, it's going to be a pain. It's a pain with a copy and paste macro. So in the second video, I have to make this in 2 parts. I've tried before to make it in 1 part, and it simply didn't work. I was rambling on for too long. We're going to talk about using a user-defined function to fix this circular reference. Now, if somebody is screaming at me saying, get to the point with the user-defined function, you can go straight to the second video and skip this first one. Sorry for that noise. Okay. Oh, God. Now, here, to do this, particularly for the user-defined function, we absolutely need this 1 and 0 true and false switches. We'll see why. It just makes it so much easier. And here are the general principles. First, create all the equations and then work through the bad copy and paste method. Then once you have that, the second video, we're going to work backwards from the copy and paste problems. What caused the circular reference, and reprogram everything. And we're going to open a little bit of a little program to help us along. And I'm trying to make this easy. I'm trying to show you it's easy, and I'm kind of a hypocrite because I've been so frustrated it's not so easy. And here's my problem, the copy and paste. It's like a cancer on the model. You start to have a whole bunch of copy and paste macros, and then you can't use the models for goal seeks with biddings, and you can't really use an iteration button. So first, I'm going to our copy and paste kind of method. Now, in what I have done is put a little assumption sheet, a red little assumptions sheet here. And in our red assumption sheet, I have a tax depreciation life. I have a tax depreciation rate, a tax rate, excuse me, of 27%. I put 1.5. I get a different kind of DSCI, 1.2, you know. Okay, that's our sculpting. And then we can put a longer tenor or a shorter tenor, okay. Now the reason this works is I don't have any circular references resolved, and then we have a changing interest rate. So, I think have discussed a little bit. I've made this video too many times, I can't keep track, but we start with there's some cash flows. We have some EBITDA, very nice. F11, Alt-EL, okay. And then we have some depreciation expense. And this is the depreciation expense is a big deal. That's just straight line. That's, let me see here. Ooh. Very bad. It should continue. We should have a switch there to make it continue. Okay. Not to worry. Not to worry. And then we have the capital expenditures for the project, including permits and all this stuff. And then down here, we have some uses of funds and sources of funds. That's the debt sizing. Now, I haven't put any debt in yet, so we're going to make it all equity, all right? I'm just going to kind of review what the basics are. We go through the funding needs, okay, and our funding needs include all our development costs, our construction costs, and most importantly, the IDC fees I didn't put in, and then we get a total. Now, once we have the total, I put, a little bit of a separate thing here for just the expenditures without the IDC, because those are going to be necessary for the user-defined function in a little bit. But right now, if it's all equity funding, we say, okay, here's the funding, and then what we do is we say, well, let's see how much is left over. So let's take away the opening balance of the funding. This is the way I do. Perhaps you have a better way. And see what's left over. The reason we need to know what's left over, we use a classic kind of minimum function where we take the minimum of the funding needs or how much equity is left over to fund. That's what we do. And right now, all the thing is funded by equity. And then once we have that, we go through the debt repayment. And this is where we do some of the sculpting. Now, I took out the taxes from the CFADS. That's really important. And I also took out the interest during construction. I left some little range names here for us to make the copy and paste. Okay. Now, once we've done that, then we can compute the target debt service. Now, this is really important. We put in the start year and the end year, and we put a little switch. I strongly suggest you put the switch near where you're using it, and you don't make a long list of 50 different switches in some other random switch page. Okay, and then we, here is the, where did I put the credit? Here's the tenor. We put the tenor, that's our COD, and then we add 12 to the COD, so that's the year we repay the debt, or the year after we've repaid the debt, actually. And then we get our little switch. So when we compute the target debt service, you use that switch. No big problem. And then we have the interest rates that change. Now, this is a lookup function, and frankly, it's driving me completely batty. Completely crazy that the red one didn't go over to the side. I've worked on that so much you don't know. My life is horrible sometimes. And then we add these together. We add these two together, and we get the interest rate. Now, the interest rate only is important after COD because the present value of the debt service at the interest rate is what drives everything. If the interest rate changes, we need to take the last period and kind of add, just keep incrementing it by the interest rate. So then we finally get the NPV of the debt service, which is the sum product of all of the debt service. Now you have to, if you're going to do it and divide it like I do, you cannot take an entire row or entire column like I sometimes do. That gives us the debt service. Now remember, I took out the taxes. So all of this stuff here about taxes and depreciation so far isn't important, but it will be important in a minute. Okay, and then finally we can get the equity IRR. Now, if I go up here and I put the debt in, I did put the debt in. This debt now comes from the sizing of the debt, comes from the NPV of the debt service up here. And now our sources and uses still balance and everything's okay. We don't have a circular reference. But let's do this. Let's put the sum of all of the interest during construction, this line in, and then we get a kind of a classic circular reference, number 1. And this circular reference arises because the equity commitment is driven by the balance of the equity commitment is driven by the total project cost. The total project cost, the debt is fixed. The debt is fixed, and drives the equity. Now, if we have a higher interest during construction, what that means is we'd use the equity faster. The debt would remain the same, and we'd have to adjust the equity we put in. So that's our kind of first circular reference. I'll try to illustrate that one, but first I'm going to delete it. Then we have a second circular reference, and this is the real one. Here's what we have. We have, if we make a tax calculation, I start with simply the taxes on the, I'll call this our base depreciation expense. No IDC. Okay, and then we put a depreciation rate, which is just a straight line rate, no big deal. Then we have the EBITDA. We take away the basic depreciation that's not affected by anything. That's no problem. But the big problem occurs here because you might want to be taking out the interest during construction right here. You might want to be taking this thing out. And if you take this thing out, then you're going to have a more of a problem. Just 1 second. Okay, now, so if we have a IDC depreciation here, well, the debt affects the IDC, and we have some difference EBIT, and then we take away the interest, and we have EBT, and then we put in the tax rate, and we have a taxes. And sometimes we have negative taxes, and we should really make a net operating loss calculation. But I'm going to stop there. I'm not going to make that this time because I'm going to try to focus on the relationship between the IDC and the interest expense. Oh, God. Okay, and what the heck's going on here? Just excuse me for that silly noise. No. Oh, my gosh. Okay. Now, finally, we go down here and get the debt draws. The debt draws come from upstairs in the debt funding. The debt repayments are just the total amount we have of target debt service up from all of this target debt service calculation minus the interest. And the interest is computed on the opening balance, and we have some interest that's allocated to interest during construction and some interest that's allocated to interest expense. Finally, we can get the dividends in the very last year. We see how much equity we're inputting versus how much cash flow we have after the CFADS, really after the debt service. So that's all okay. As soon as we go down here and we put the taxes in, and we put the income taxes paid here, I hope, then we get a circular reference, the kind of circular reference we were expecting. And the whole thing seems to be a real mess. Now here's the real problem. If we put in this one back, the interest during construction, now we have two circular references. Okay, and the problem is the interest during construction affects the taxes, and that means it affects the sculpting calculation. This better come from up here. Okay, and it doesn't show up now, I think, because I have so many. This should be the interest during construction. It kind of are two circular references. Now, if you want to use a copy and paste macro, it looks like it's not really so bad. And here's what happens. You go to the what we can do is we can do a kind of standard thing. Let's fix the let's just put in 275 maybe of debt service, and then we put in a computed, and we have our standard sum product, and we take the target debt service and we divide that by the interest income rate, and let's make the final thing the fixed one, and then we take the difference. We need a difference now. Okay, between the computed and the fixed, and we just copy the computed to the fixed. Now I still have this circular reference for the interest during construction, and we can do the same thing. I'm just going to put 6 here for the fixed, and I'm going to make this equal to 6, and then we have a difference here. And I've already named these ranges. Let's name this one fixed NPV, and let's name this computed NPV, and let's name this difference NPV. And you will just select these 3 and press Shift Control F3. F3, I got that right. And then we're going to make the fixed equal the computed. This fixed NPV here should equal the computed. And up here, the fixed, we copy the computed to the fixed. So we make a little loop, okay? And let's make our copy and paste macro. Go to the Developer tab, go to Insert, and put a little macro here. And I already did the first copy and paste, I think. Here's what it is. It says, make the range fixed equal the range computed and loop around, do a do until, and you put the loop at the end, so we kind of should do this, until it's equal to 0, until this difference is equal to 0. Now we can do exactly the same thing down here. Okay, and down here we'll look at the thing, and this was called, I'll just move it over here for us. Shoot. And we'll call this the diff NPV. And we'll make the fixed NPV equal the COMP NPV. And we'll do it again. We'll go around again. And if we, suppose we could, this is kind of like our cancer. There are a whole lot of different circular references you can add to this model. Okay? Now, here is kind of the problem. I'm going to link it to this one. It's button 1054. Uh-oh, debug. Shoot. Diff. I put one F. Okay, I did that on purpose, you know. Okay, and then we get that difference. But after we get that difference, we have to put this difference in, and we get a difference here. And then we go down. It's a little bit of a difference, but then we have to do this one again. And then there's a little bit of a difference you don't see, and then we'd have to go around this one. And then there's a little bit of a difference you don't see, and you'd have to kind of go back and forth and do them both together. In this case, it's not so bad. And what we could do is put maybe a total difference over here. And let's call that one this difference plus the difference on the bottom. Okay, which is really small, but let's change something. How about we change the DSCR to 1.4 and change the debt tenor to 15, so we kind of want a lot more debt in, and we can even change the interest rate to 2.5%. Okay, now we get a big difference. Now, this total difference, let's select this, Shift Control F3, total difference. And then it's so simple. It's ridiculous to ever put a private kind of thing on this. We put sub, copy, paste. And then we can do until range, and this time we put total difference. Is equal to 0, and then we can put loop, and then up here we can put copy paste 1, and then we can put copy paste 2. And I hope the worst thing to do would be to be proud of this, because you've just messed up the model, I think, because it's going to be hard to do the goal seeks and everything else. And what did I do? Just a minute. Okay, I just didn't assign it to the right macro. Right, I have a debug because I put total difference. Didn't spell it correctly. It's kind of like using this option explicit thing. So we just redo it, and then we get the total difference equal to 0. And you're very proud of yourself. But now, if you have a goal seek, and want to figure out what the bid price is to get a target equity IRR, that becomes a little more difficult because we're going to the cash flows change when the bid price changes, but that changes sculpting and that changes the debt, and you're going to have to put some kind of copy and paste into this macro button, which will really be a pain. And I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stop the video. And I'm sick of this. I'm going to stop it for today. And then I'm going to make the second video on how to incorporate a function into this thing.